Making a script for your favorite editing software is a fantastic way to automate a task. This includes things like adding things to your timeline, making a new project, or even making a graphic really fast. There's automation tools like snap captions for Davinci Resolve, auto subs, and also lots of things for Premiere Pro and After Effects. In our case, for Davinci Resolve, how do you learn how to actually code for this? There's a lot of stuff about this that's just up in the air that's really hard to find. How do you learn how to actually script for Davinci Resolve? That's what we seek to answer today. So to start, check out my previous video where I talk about the differences between the APIs and what APIs are. Go and check that video out up here in the top right. So let's start with the Davinci Resolve API. In Davinci Resolve, I've gone over this a few times. If you come up here to help, come down here to documentation and developer, it'll bring you to this folder full of all these documentations. If you go into any of these, you'll have examples, you might have a README file or a PDF, but we want to come down here to the scripting folder and open up the README file. This is updated with the most recent versions of Davinci Resolve, so every time you update Davinci, there's a chance this is going to update too. I would recommend making a folder called previous where you can store the old files, just make a copy of it and put it in there. Therefore, you can easily detect what the differences are, but I also have a great replacement for that in the description for you to check out as well, which we'll also be looking at today. In the README file, we can see starting off at the very top, we have just a basic introduction to what this file is. We talk about when it was last updated, this is just a brief explanation, and gives a quick overview of what this thing is. It also gives you prerequisites, how to use a script, where to put the files for scripts. It also introduces a little bit about modules, which we can obviously talk about later. And then it also has this example code right here in Python. And this is great, but it's actually not a fantastic example to put here, because this is not actually how you get the script object for Python. This has been very confusing for some users, and I'm going to shed some light on this in a future video. But for right now, let's just ignore this. Come on down here to the actual important part. We have the Davinci Resolve API. This stores every single function that you're able to call and interact with the API. The one thing that it does not tell you how to actually access is the Davinci Resolve object itself. It just kind of tells you that the Resolve object is a thing without really telling you how to get it. And I have talked about this in the previous video, but I'll also be bringing this up in a little bit here in this video. We can see we have the function, we have the object that it belongs to, we have what it returns to you, and then also it describes a little bit about what this does. So for example, if we come on down here to the folder object, we can see we have get clip list. Now for clarification, folder in this instance is actually a bin in the media pool. I don't know why they named it differently in the code, but it's just a bin. We have get clip list, which as you can assume is going to give you a list of clips, which is what this is telling you. And there are downsides about this file. There are no examples. There is no easy way to tell how to actually use some things. And some of the things are kind of left up to interpretation for Lua users, because this is written in mostly a Python syntax with a little bit of workflow integration JavaScript worked in there. Down here past all the actual functions, we have some different categories of things related to the functions at the very top. It talks about some of the Lua and Python dictionaries, mostly how it's Python. It also talks about a bunch of other settings all throughout the file. But if we keep scrolling down, we'll actually find the depreciated and unsupported functions. This is very important to note. If you've used some older code, if you're using ChatGPT or whatever have you, and you try to use an older function in certain situations, it will not work. You have to be sure that you're using the most up-to-date code. And everything that has been put into here has been updated to a new function. It just doesn't have the same name as the old function name. We can see right here, we have get items in track of the timeline object, but if we look up get item list in track, we'll actually find the updated function right up here in the timeline object. So we can see, even though they replaced the function, it still exists just with a different name. And we can even see the inputs for the function right here are exactly the same. So they don't change them much, just behind the scenes they've changed, and they have to change the name for that reason. This is the Resolve API. How do you learn about the Fusion API? This is where things get a little bit more rocky, because there's no way to find the API within Davinci Resolve itself. You have to go to an external website and look for it yourself a little bit. So if I come up here and do a search for just the Davinci Resolve Fusion API, we want to come on down here to the scripting guide and reference manual. This is the only existing manual for the Fusion API as of 2024. They may make a new version in the future that fixes a lot of the issues with this document, but as of right now, this is just how we have to learn. And as we can see at the bottom here, this hasn't been updated in almost 10 years. It's been 2016 since the last update. It is 2024. We are 2 years away from this being 10 years old. Blackmagic Design basically purchased Fusion, made this new fancy scripting PDF, and forgot about it, kind of. They've done some behind the scenes updating, but they've never actually done a full update to the actual PDF. stuff. But we can scroll through this, we can find all the different sections, we can also come over here, click on the chapters, see all the sections, you can jump to all of them, or you can do Control F and search the document for something in particular. Like if we look up run script, we'll find how to run a script inside of a composition. Certain things are going to be harder to find than others. You may have to search for them a while. For example, if you look up set input, you're going to find some stuff pretty fast because there's set inputs for tools, there's set inputs all over the place for operators, and it has different names for things, but a tool is an operator. And you kind of have to read through the documentation to understand the terminology that they use. For the most part, it's pretty easy to understand. Everything's nicely laid out for you. There's examples in Python and in Lua. It's a very, very nice API. I love this API a lot. There's so much love put into this from the original developers from Ion Software, and there was a lot of love put into the actual documentation of this when they first obtained Ion Software. This is a really, really nice document that goes over a lot of amazing stuff. This is the best and only resource to learn Fusion scripting. Now, what about the Resolve API? Now, I talked about how that README file was very confusing. There were no examples. It was just kind of put there as like a requirement by the developers. Like, hey, we've made the API, we kind of have to give you the information for it. So here's the functions and what they do, and also the objects that they belong to. But if you want to learn how to do it, you better be a kind of experienced developer. I poke fun just because I know that this is probably not their intention, but it is kind of what happens is like you have to either have a tutorial to teach you how to use it or have some experience as a developer to know how to use it. And it's not really your fault or their fault. It's just kind of they don't have the time or money to put into it, so they don't really have a need to do that. So other people on their own free will have taken their time and made amazing documentation for this. I'm going to have this linked down in the description, but this is a fantastic resource. This is the prettified version of this documentation, but there's also the original thread right here. If you come over here to the source, you can see this is just from the original README file, and you can see they have it up to date. They update this very frequently, and even very recently, they've created this actual preview to make it very easy to read. So a huge thank you to XRAM for making this. It is a fantastic tool. Huge thanks. Please donate to them. We got to keep these things up and running. It is fantastic that they were able to put this together, and it actually is super easy to navigate. This is fantastic, but still no example. And they also don't tell you how to actually activate the Resolve API. How do you get the Resolve object? They give you the Python example again, which as I said, isn't very good. Here, I've actually introduced a couple more websites, two of which, this one is very similar to the one you've just previously seen, but it has a couple more things in here. It's maybe laid out a little bit more user-friendly, but it does have all the same information in here. Once again, it has that example script, which once again, isn't very helpful since this isn't actually how you get the Resolve object. But we can see this is pretty much just the Resolve API once again put into a website format. I don't believe this has been updated regularly with the newest versions, but this one has. So if you want to have the newest versions of all the functions, this is a great place for it. If you want maybe a different just look for it, you can go to here. But this one right here is probably the best with the actual examples. Now we can see it's not up to date. It is as of 2022, and we have pretty much a lot of the same stuff we see in the actual README file. And there is still no example on how to get the Resolve API. But if you click on the basic Resolve API right here, we can see they try to tell you how to get it from this, which is still not very helpful because like I've been saying, that's not how you get the Resolve API. This is a module in the examples for scripting. You cannot get the Resolve API strictly from this. But as we scroll through here, you're going to see everything in this has examples with variable assignments in a Python format. A lot of them have been tested, but there's still a few like this one that has not actually been tested yet, but they still give an example of what it probably would be. And I'm gonna guess that this website's not going to update their documentation on this just because they haven't updated this since 2022, but this is a fantastic way for you to get a good understanding and a good launching point for all the Resolve API stuff. This is fantastic for beginners. If you're in Lua and you wanna learn the Lua stuff, whenever you see the syntax right here where there's a period before the function and after the object, place this with a colon, and then that will actually call the function. The difference is in Python and JavaScript, period after the object actually can call functions and objects and a bunch of other things. But in Lua, a colon is strictly for functions, and then a period is strictly for operations. I don't think I said that right. And we can even see that we have the existing Resolve API down here. It gives you all the same information that you can find in the actual README file. Pretty nice. And we can also come on down here to the workflow integration README just to explain a little bit about workflow integrations. Although this isn't very helpful, just because the Resolve API is what they use in the workflow integration API. But another great thing about this website is they also have examples for all of the Fusion UI stuff. Pause. We're just gonna huge pause right now before we continue. This has been locked to the studio version of Davinci Resolve as of version 19.1. I don't know why they made the decision to do that. Maybe it was a maintenance thing. Maybe they just didn't want to pay people to maintain it or something like that. If you bought a script from me that you can't use anymore, feel free to ask me for a refund. I might be able to offer you one. I'm not too sure how my website works, but I can totally try. This is a huge disappointment for all of us involved. I really wish that I was able to give you guys these free scripts or even paid for scripts that could use this UI system that could do really cool things. Unfortunately, you have to have Studio. But we can see this is kind of talking about the workflow integration introduction again, because, fun fact, the UI system in Davinci kind of uses the same UI system as like HTML, CSS, and the JavaScript is replaced with just your Lua script or Python script. And as we scroll through this, we're going to see this is once again in the syntax of Python. It's a little bit different in Lua, and I really would recommend checking out my videos I have on the UI system. I'm gonna probably do some more breakdown videos going over the UI system, also going over different functions and stuff like that. So look out for those videos in the future where I just break down individual things to hopefully give you a better understanding of it. But this is a fantastic place for you to learn. A lot of this stuff, even though it hasn't been tested, is probably correct. A lot of these examples, for example, right here, shows a great example on how to actually make a window. It's a great launching point for all of you beginners. We have them all laid out into the layout, which is how to actually lay out your V group and window and everything. This is just a Python example that they whipped up, that they made a variable that actually had all the groups and all the elements in an array of sorts. And then they just plug that array into the UI system. This isn't really possible exactly with Lua, but it's still really cool to know you could do this. And then over here we have it laid out with all the elements that you can actually add onto your tree, including all the different like arrays and different smaller parts of things. We have the functions that you're able to call to interact with those things, and then also the event handlers. Whenever something happens, like a click on a button or an anchor click on a link, you're able to actually do something with that information that happens. So once again, this is a fantastic place for you beginners to learn all the different things for the scripting API. There is one last thing I would like to leave you with, and that would be an announcement for a brand new tool. Not necessarily a Davinci Resolve tool, but it is for Davinci Resolve. You confused yet? All right. Over here in VS Code, we can see we have this little Resolve logo. What's this doing here? What's this doing? If we click this, we have all these options. We can see we have workflow integration section, we have a script section, and we have Resolve API and Fusion API, along with a Get Help section. This is my own VS Code extension. You're able to create projects or workflow integrations and scripts. You're able to open up your folders for your scripts, workflow integrations, and even more. And you're also able to open up immediately to the APIs for Resolve. This brings you to the most up-to-date web-based option I gave you. And this brings you to the PDF we have to learn off of. Down here, we have just my links. We have my Discord, my development website, and also my YouTube. So if you need to learn anything else or get more resources from there, go check it out. It's fantastic. But along with just this nice tab bar, which you're able to click this and you're able to launch this, you can just say, my new script. We can select the folder it's going to go into. We can just say utility, and we can select the language. We'll just say Lua, create project, and it will create it, add it to the folder, and also open it up in your editor. Now we can get doing some cool stuff. Now, if you're not too familiar with what a VS Code extension can do, they have something called snippets, which is essentially you type in a small little string, and then a bunch of stuff can be created out of that. So if we type in, for example, RS, and this is just shorthand that I've created for Resolve setup, and we can see it creates all of these elements. We click this, or we press tab, or we press enter, and it will add all of these immediately into our project. And we can see right here in Lua, you get the Resolve object this way, by the way. But we have the Resolve object, we have the project manager, media storage, the project, the current timeline, the media pool, and the gallery. All of these really handy for certain situations. Fantastic to just get them imported right away, but also, as you start typing in some of these options over here, some of the function names, you can actually get them to start auto-completing. So if we just type in get list, we can see all the things that can get us lists. So if we just look through these, we can see, okay, let's try to find one. So we can see right here, we have get timeline item list and track. If we click this, we can get immediately that function we looked at earlier, get item list and track. We have the option to put in a video, audio, or subtitle option in here, and we can also put in the track index for whichever track we actually want to look at. And then we can assign this to a variable. Now this is an array of all the timeline clip objects that were on that track. And we can loop through them or whatever we want to do. We can call just the first index and do something with that. Bunch of crazy stuff we can do with this, and it's really fast. We also have the UI system, so if you just type in UI and press tab, you get a basic UI starter kit. And if you don't click out of this and just leave it as it is, we can actually start to replace these things. And if we want to call this something else, like just main win from main window, we can replace all of the things that require that variable all at the same time. And then we can press tab to go on to the next thing, which is calling to the ID, which will also replace the ID down here for the close event. And we can just call this main window 1, for example. Press tab again, and we go to the next thing. And this is the title. So main window, and we can press tab again and go on to the next one. This is the geometry. We can put in whatever we want. You know, we can put in like 50, 78, I don't know, 100, and then 200. And we can tab again, and then we get taken to the middle of this. Now this is where we can actually start typing in our actual code. And in here, if we just type in label, we'll get a UI label and also label CSS. So if we just type in the UI label, we get all the stuff in here. Let's just put in a comma there. And we can get this example UI label with a bunch of stuff built into it. So you have a great example of what you can do with this basic UI element. You can also get the event handlers over here as well. So if you wanted to, you can get a click event. So we can either simulate a button click event or get when a button click has actually happened. So we can get it right here. And it will not take your variable name, so you'll have to copy that. And also you have to put in the individual ID for your button. But this gives you a fantastic, easy way to get started with putting in all these functions and event handlers. This is a fantastic way to both learn the API and also see what is available in the API. Because sometimes looking at a big document isn't always the best. Now, beyond all of this, we also have the BMD library, but the BMD library is a separate list of functions that we can actually access to do a bunch of crazy stuff like crashing resolve, creating a folder, create a random unique ID. You can check if a folder exists. You can get the clipboard of the user. We can get the current folder within the Blackmagic Design function API. My favorite is the write string object. This is actually brings in a bunch of example text for you. So we will get a table, put it into here. We will stringify the table, and then this just prints out the table just so you can see what it looks like. This is only really available within the actual Resolve API. And keep in mind that the BMD library is locked to just Python and Lua. Another great thing is if you come on down here to your settings, come over here to extensions, and then find Davinci Resolve Toolkit, I ask for your global scripts path, your user scripts path, and also wherever your workflow integrations are stored. So if this is not working for you, you can always replace these file paths and they should then work for you. And we can just click on opening the user folder. It's going to open up this user folder that we have right here. You can also create a workflow integration project. And if you don't have anything open in your folders right here, you can actually create a new folder by going into create project and then going into whatever folder you want to make this in. So we can just make this in a example folder right here. We can select that and it will open it up. It'll take your username from your computer. It'll take that folder name that you just created and you can put in a description. So my example. We can give it a version number. We'll just give it a version of 0.1. And we can also give a license. I like the MIT license. It's a pretty standard license. And then you can then create the project. It'll create it and open it in a new window. We have a workflow integration.node file, and we also have the basic setup for all of our scripts. So if you haven't used workflow integrations before, I do plan on making videos for this in the future. Something important to note if you're actually using this, you may notice that the workflow integration.node file you get has the version that you're on. It has the OS type you're on. If you come back over here to the actual sidebar and look at download other os.node, this is going to download, if you're on Windows, it's going to download the mac.node file. If you're on Mac, it's going to download the windows.node file. This is just stored to my GitHub with an example workflow integration file. It's basically the same file that's created whenever you create a workflow integration with this, but you can actually download the actual .node file separately. We can see it's going to say download complete. And in here we have now the Mac and the Win. If we come back over here to main, we can see we can check if the platform is Darwin, which is Mac, or if it's anything else, basically if it's Windows, then initiate the Windows one. And then this workflow integration is the starting point for the API. To get this extension, you can come on over here to the extensions menu, search up here in the bar, Davinci Resolve, and you should be able to find right at the top, Davinci Resolve Toolkit. You can find it, you can see all the information about it. I go over videos over here explaining how to use some of these features, what they are, going over like what these folders open up to, how to get help, all sorts of fun stuff, including we have a little bit of information about how the snippets work, what the settings are, the requirements of just having Davinci Resolve or Fusion and also VS Code, and then also talking about the actual updates as they come out. It currently is missing the entire Fusion API. It just has like the starting point for it, but I am going to be adding slowly all of those functions that we saw in that 100 and whatever document. So I'm going to be introducing all of these things eventually into this, but it's going to take some time because there's so much to look through. This was a fantastic starting point for your Resolve journey. If you've watched my previous video where I actually introduced a little bit more about the Resolve APIs and what APIs are, this is a fantastic follow-up, but also there's another fantastic follow-up. If you check out this video right here, I go over actually introducing you to Lua for scripting in Davinci Resolve. I go over just Lua stuff right here in this video. This is a fantastic starting point if you have never really used Lua that often. Go check this video out, but also I'll have other resources down in the description to learn Lua as well, because I may not be the best teacher for you. And also check out this video over here. I go over a lot more crazy stuff with the Resolve API. Go check it out. But I'll go ahead and see you guys in the next one. Happy animating.